Hey guys, JP here with Extreme IE. In this video, we are going to take a look at application segmentation using Cisco Tetration. Now, I already have an application built out. I'll show you guys how I generated the policy and all that kind of stuff in another video, but we're going to use this finance application here that I've got built out. Before we actually go in and take a look at the policy and take a look at what's been generated for us and essentially lock it down, let's go ahead and take a look at the app itself. So in my case here, I have a freeware invoicing app. And here, it's a perfectly working application. So you can see that I can go in here, I can look at different invoices, I can look at different customers and go into some customer data and delete customers, add customers, whatever I want to do. So this is a fully functioning application as it lives in my infrastructure today. Now, we have a three-tier application. So the way that this guy works is there is a web tier, there is an app tier, and then I also have a database tier. And so what Tetration has done for me is automatically map out how these servers communicate and has also generated an automated policy for me. So in other words, let's say that this guy inbound is 443. Let's say that talking to the app server, it's port, I don't know, 1578, who cares? And this guy, let's say it's 3306 for MySQL. Um, Tetration has essentially generated exactly what ports are required for these guys to essentially communicate. It's also looking at who is actually accessing my particular application. So in my case, I've taken my campus users and I've put them into a little bucket and just labeled them users. And so what we'll see is that I do actually have an inbound rule into that web server that says yes, my users are allowed to access the web server, but I'm only going to allow access on the ports that are essentially required. So in theory, I should not be able to ping this particular web server once we lock it down. And I have an Nmap tab over here. What we're going to do before we enforce it is we'll do an Nmap scan. We'll see what's available. We'll see what kind of data we're able to pull up with Nmap, and then we'll go ahead and we will lock it down. We'll enforce it, and then we'll see what happens next. So let's take a look at this application. Let's take a look at this policy really, really quick. So I'll go into finance. The first thing that I want to take a look at is my clusters. Now, if you guys are familiar with ACI, you know that within ACI, we have what we call endpoint groups, right? EPGs. Now, typically in ACI, if we're running in network mode, this would be equivalent to a VLAN. If we're running in application mode, this would be something like maybe Exchange, right? So maybe we call it Exchange, for email, or we call it SMTP or something. Maybe we call it database, or we call it SQL, or whatever we want to call it. And so these EPGs within the context of ACI, we generally have to group together by ourselves. Tetration is using behavioral analytics to identify what these things are. Now, yes, I went in and renamed them app tier, DB tier, web tier so that I could essentially understand what they were. But the groupings of them, so in other words, where you see the database tier has 3 servers, the web tier has 3 servers, the app tier has 2 servers, Tetration did that on its own using behavioral analytics. And if I show you another way we can do this, if I highlight this DB tier over here and I say edit cluster query, you'll notice that I'm actually putting all these servers into a group based on a tag. Right? And Tetration will automatically generate these tags for us. We'll automatically start to try and figure out, I shouldn't say we'll automatically generate these for us. These are actually being pulled from a CMDB. But what I mean is that Tetration will be smart enough to say, okay, I have these 3 servers. They're acting exactly the same, meaning they're having the same conversations. They have the same processes running locally on the servers, meaning they're doing the same things. And also, if I cross-check these servers with any CMDB that we have, this could be vCenter, this could be info blocks, I'll just put IB, this could be DNS, this could be a CMDB like ServiceNow, for example. I'll just put SN for ServiceNow. So if we're synchronizing Tetration with anything like this could also be Kubernetes, for example. We have a lot of external orchestrators that we can pull in data. Tetration will say, okay, I see these 3 servers. They have the same conversations. They have the same local processes. And oh, by the way, I also happen to see that within your CMDB, these same 3 servers are grouped together as being database servers for this application called SciWap. So it will automatically put these together, group them together based on their behavior, and then give us some query options. I'll go into what this really means later on. The point is that that Tetration has grouped this together automatically. Let's take a look at the policy. So here I have 22 policies that kind of outline what my servers can and essentially cannot do. So in this case, what we're seeing is we're actually seeing the one-to-one policies. Even though this displays as a group, what Tetration is actually doing is saying, okay, your web tier needs access to your domain services tier under NTP. I can actually filter that down if I actually wanted to see it. So for example, if I want to see my web tier having conversations with my domain services, I could come over here and say view conversations, and Tetration would show me exactly what those conversations are. It's important to know that Tetration is essentially doing this actively. It's looking at these conversations in real time, and even after I've generated the policy, even after I go and enforce the policy, Tetration is still going to learn conversations. It won't modify the policy without my say so, but it will continue to learn conversations, which is pretty cool. So let's head over here to Nmap. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick scan of my application. So I'm saying, look, I want, by the way, this is just an Nmap wrapper that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, I want you to scan my application called Finance, and I want you to tell me essentially what you come up with. Now I'm going to pause the video and I'll just come back once the screen lights back up. So I'll see you guys in about a minute. Okay, so my Nmap finished in about 2 minutes or so. This is a pretty basic tool. I mean, you guys can actually go and download Nmap. You can run it on your laptop at work and just kind of use it to scan the servers within your data center. In my case here, my Nmap has found 8 servers within my environment. And if I go in here, let me go back in here. Let's look at our web tier, and we'll find an IP address here. So we'll look at .54. So if I come over here and pick .54, right, this guy here, you can see that Nmap has found a couple of different things about this particular server. So it's found that, look, we have SSH open, we have HTTP open, port 80, 8080, 8081. It's even so nice as to tell us the different services that it's found. So in other words, it tells us that it's found Apache, right? So it even knows what version of Apache that we're running. It knows what version of SSH we're running. And so Nmap is a pretty cool tool to actually show you whether or not this particular server or application is vulnerable or can be seen. So in our case, right, the problem here is that this application is open and vulnerable to what could possibly be a remote attacker, right? Somebody coming in, doing a scan on my application, grabbing some information, and then possibly trying to exploit some particular vulnerability or something like that that they may find out there for Apache version whatever or OpenSSH version whatever. So what we want to do is we want to essentially enforce this application. We want to lock it down so that this remote attacker or this individual that's doing Nmap will not be able to see this application. Now, how would we do this 10 years ago, right? Or how would we do this even without Tetration, right? The answer is that we wouldn't. We would go in, we would have a bunch of VRFs or private VLANs or, all these different firewall zones. It would be very complicated and very difficult to manage. Now, there are other vendors out there that can do I would say, very similar tasks to Tetration. The problem is that they don't scale very well. In other words, if you have 300 firewalls in your environment today, some of the customers I deal with have in the thousands. You have 1,000 firewalls today. Each one has 2,000 rules on that, on each firewall, and you struggle to manage that today. You struggle to understand what all those firewalls and all those firewall rules are doing today. How would you expect to just go buy another tool with essentially all of these additional rules that you're going to help manage? The idea with Tetration is that it's going to be able to draw you something like this, right? It's going to be able to draw you a map to where I can come in and I can say, oh, okay, I get it. My users are accessing my web tier and my application tier. Oh, I see. I have a load balancer right here, and these are the ports that I have open within my load balancer. Oh, okay, I get it now, right? Not only do I know how my application is working, but Tetration is going to manage all of those ACLs, all of those firewall rules for me. I don't have to manage it. Now, before I go and enforce this, Tetration has a really, really cool feature, which is called policy analysis. What this allows us to do is this actually allows us to see based on our policy. So in my case, I have a policy that I just generated. If I were to have that policy, for a longer period of time, maybe I go back. You can see here I can go back a maximum in this particular cluster 2 years, but I can go back 6 months, and I could say, okay, Tetration, take that policy that I just built, take that policy that I'm about to push down to my application, and not only look at whether that would have protected me against an attack or would that have gotten me past my audit, but also I can throw this into what we call analysis mode, which is basically Tetration prior to enforcement will essentially analyze that policy and see what we would block, what we wouldn't block, etc. Right? It will be able to do that going forward so that we make sure before we actually put in a policy what's going to break, what do we have to worry about, right? And you can see here that I have a number of different categories. I have permitted, I have escaped, I have dropped, I have rejected, and I'll get into what those categories are probably in another video. For now, what I want to do is I want to head over here and I want to go ahead and I want to click enforce. So we're going to take this policy that we built, these 22 policies over here, right? They allow the web tier to talk to various different things, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to enforce it. When we enforce it, what we should see is we should see our Nmap come back completely empty, but the application itself, we should be able to refresh it and still be able to use it. So let's give this a whirl. Let's say enforce, we'll say latest policies, and we will click go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wait about 2 minutes. I've actually demonstrated the policy enforcement in another video. So what I'll do is I'll stop this one. I'll wait about 2 minutes and we'll come back once the policies are pushed. Okay, guys, so we're back. I went ahead and while I was waiting, I opened up another tab within Tetration. I brought up what we call the workload profile. So let me bring that up. And every single endpoint that we are essentially monitoring or we're looking at or we're mapping out or we're enforcing policies on, we will build what we call a workload profile. And within that profile, you'll be able to actually see exactly what policies are being enforced and what direction they're in. Now, what's really cool about Tetration is that remember, it's a whitelist model. So at the end of the policy, you're going to see a drop all, right? So in other words, everything is going to be allow. We're only going to allow the actual processes or the actual communication flows that we know that we need after we've mapped out the application. But at the end of that, there's going to be a catch-all, deny everything. And so we're not going to leave kind of like a safety open that says, well, you know, only allow these ports, but allow everything else as well, right? That really defeats the purpose of any type of segmentation. So we know at this point that this server or these servers, this application now has these policies that we've pushed down. In other words, they're only allowed to ever do what we see them doing. So right now, what this would be is these users, whoever this user subnet has been defined as, these are the only ones that are allowed to see this particular application. They can only get to the app tier or the web tier. We can even, which is really cool, and I won't be able to show you this in this particular video, but today Tetration supports F5 load balancers. We also support NetScaler. I'll just put NS for NetScaler. We also support AVI networks. Now, some of these load balancers actually have the ability to enforce policies. What do I mean by that? Well, right now, we are actually pushing policies down to the actual endpoints themselves. In a load balancer case, Tetration can actually take that policy and stream it out to a load balancer. So maybe we want to say, look, you know, maybe we want to enforce a policy here that maybe we only allow these guys inbound or something like that. We're not going to do that in this case. I'm just showing you that it is something that we can do. It's pretty cool if you ask me. So anyway, let's go back to our application. Let's refresh the screen and let's see if we can still use it. So let's actually sign out. Let's do that. Let's say log out. And let's go ahead and we'll log back in. We'll make sure that we can get to it. Some of you may say that it's cached. So let's go to a tab we didn't go through before. So we'll say products and we'll bring up a test product. This was something that we did not do before. What about estimates? We didn't look at that before either. Let's look at Western Gas and Electric. Here's an estimate. Let's go ahead and add an item. We'll just make it up, blah, blah, blah. And we'll say that this cost is going to be, I don't know, $1 bazillion. And we'll go ahead and save that. Where's the nifty difty save button? So there we go. Right, so there's our estimate. We're going to make 11 grand now. Good. Somewhere I think it got the math messed up, but regardless. So our application is still working, even though now we're actually enforcing a security policy. Let's go to our Nmap tool and let's actually refresh this scan. So let's kind of hang out for a minute and let's watch it go. Let's actually see what Nmap comes up and finds. And you can see that right away, it comes up and it found absolutely nothing. So what we've done here is in a matter of 10 or 15 minutes, we've taken a security policy, we've taken an application within our environment, an application that could be something that's very critical to us. We've scanned it, we've mapped it out, we've said, okay, show us how this application works, what is it doing? In another video, I'll show you guys how we're able to automatically start to discover what these guys are. So, my pen, what is this web tier? What is this database tier, etc. But regardless, we've mapped it out, we've created a policy, and we've gone ahead and enforced it very, very quickly within our data center. So this is how Tetration can essentially be leveraged to enforce your policies and secure your applications within your data center. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.